I'm Ellen Whitney, and I worked with my partner Jane Deering to make this something special for the Concord Museum's Holiday House Tour this year. We really felt privileged to be here at this spot, which is so full of spirit. Of course, it's Ralph Waldo Emerson's family's barn. It was his barn when he moved here in the 19th century. It was used for his carriages, a cow, a horse or two. They did something similar to what we did, and I'll show you that, but they did sometimes move all the carriages out and set up a long table, decorate with greens, have a really festive, fun time here. And it was that spirit that my partner and I thought we wanted to see if we could revive for this December day. So let me tell you a little bit about our process. What we saw first here, we were really lucky. They had just renovated the barn, just cleaned it out. So what we had was this nice blank space, but it really was pretty blank. We saw these benches that were just brought in for the winter from the outside around the edges of the space. There was tucked away in the corner, there was this wonderful old sideboard that we ended up covering with desserts to bring a little glisten into this dark corner, a little glisten and sparkling light. I mean, we were struck right away by the magic of these old broad boards everywhere, underfoot, on the walls. And then, of course, and the family pointed out to us right away this special graffiti that's over here on the wall. And this is William Emerson, the W.E., Ralph Waldo Emerson's grandson, and his great friend, John Culhane. Well, John Culhane Sr. was a caretaker, worked for the family for a good part of the late 19th century. So they were buddies and they made their mark in this barn. It just, to us, felt so resonant and spirit-filled in this space. So that was our aim, to really kind of pump up that spirit, bring, for this season and for this experience of being, in this sort of hallowed space, Ralph Waldo Emerson's own space. Some of that spirit of all the lives that passed through here. And so I'll show you some of the details of how we did that. But boy, I want to tell you what a privilege it was to be here over those weeks in this wonderful space. So hoping to just share some of that with you this morning. Right away, we knew that what we wanted to do was not exactly recreate one of these family gatherings, but rather, not tie it to a specific time, but do something that brought energy back. And the way to do that, I find in design, is to create contrast. Anytime you have contrast, that will really bring some energy in. So you have, like over here on the table, you have the whiteness, brightness, smoothness of this long damask tablecloth. And then it was my partner, Jane, who said, that is very bright in this space. Let's take this beautiful old Oriental, but quite tattered. It has a big burlap patch in it over here, really weathered against the refinement of this, and put it on top of the damask so that knocks back all the white, so it's not too stark, but it also starts to create this tension, and that's where some energy comes from, and then that feels so spirited. Underfoot, we have this very rustic, very rough and textural pine boards, and so we wanted to contrast that with some real opulence and richness on the tables. And gosh, I was so lucky to have this family piece that's too much, right? But in this barn space, it just gives it that zing. It's so different. So really, what we were thinking we were creating here was not the family meal as it was set up, but again, I think this feeling of the family had just stood up from their meal just walked out the door. So, the candles are still lit, but the plates are empty, except for some remains, the oyster shells, the cracked walnuts, the half-drank glasses of wine, so you really have the feeling, as it is after a wonderful dinner party, you just have this little resonance that's left of all of the people, I think the warmth of their bodies even still around the table, as they'd left their napkins, they left some of their fur coats. The candles are burning low now. Perhaps we debated even, do we blow out the candles and then have that wonderful smell, that particular smell that comes after that moment. So, as you stand here, I think if you could almost hear that stomp of the horse in the stable just beside all of this glory, that, the smell of the hay, the sound of laughter out in the snow or on the lawn as they've just gone out there. And I hope you get even sort of the breath of the people, the spirits from long ago here, and then over time. So, it was just, and then of course we got really into the details, and there are things like, there are pears in this compote. Well, Ralph Waldo Emerson's favorite fruit were pears, and he had pear trees, and so we knew we wanted to bring in pears, and we did it by filling these compotes at either end of the table with pears, but not just any pears. Jane and I love to look at just the very detail of things. She had a neighbor who had his own pear trees, so we started on this project mid-November, so she just caught the very last of the harvest, and we crossed our fingers we could make them last until now. But they have then all of that like rustic, old-fashioned quality. And then as they did decay a bit toward the end of this, we felt like that just took on even more of that sort of life spirit and that fermentation. We talked about that with the wine and with what was happening along the table, like the ferment of ideas that must have happened, in this space, some certainly in this broader area, a lot of that. We debated how to bring light into this space. Of course, we couldn't light the candles on the day of the tour, so we used these just sort of running down the table. But we knew that we could use Christmas lights, those sparkly Christmas lights, pretty well in this space. So we didn't want to do anything too conventional with them. This is making me think I'll tell you a little bit about the greens in this space first before I tell you about how they were lit. Our hope was that we could, rather than buying greens, just cut some greens from our own yards and around town, and that then they have, just seems like more of the Concord spirit than ones that might have come down from Canada, and they might be a little bit rougher, more like what would have been here, like these hemlocks, this like open bit of hemlock that is just sitting in my own grandmother's milk basket. It used to have milk bottles, and then she outfitted it with tennis ball cans to pick flowers. And that's what my mother and now I use to harvest flowers for our arrangements. But just very rustic things. And this basket just spilling over. Now, I brought it into the space. It is filled with buckets that have this juniper in it. And I brought it in like this. And my partner said, I think we need to just leave it in that very sort of rustic, lively, to us kind of evocative shape. And it's sitting again on one of her Oriental rugs, but we just crumpled it up just the way the greens spill out of the basket. So, not meant to be beautiful particularly, just meant to kind of give you the feeling of energy and people having been in this space and walked across that rug. So again, the greens. Well, of course, there's a big statement of greens in the back. And we knew in this big space we wanted to do something with the back. We debated and we tried different things. We were thinking, where are we? We did want trees back here because of the scale and because, of course, what Ralph Waldo Emerson did for all of us, one of the many things, was to show us the way the spirit resided in nature and really bring our thinking around to that. So very important to Jane and me that we have a big natural statement within this barn. So the great thing that happened was I asked the family if we could cut a bit from their land, and they so kindly said, of course. So all of these white pine trees, I don't think we knew that we were going to use all this white pine until we got into that piece of family land. And it was just filled with groves of these volunteer white pines. So we cut and cut and cut and brought them all in here. And then it was quite the project to try them and try to get the rhythm that we wanted and the relationships between the trees as their branches wound in and out of each other, as we had some more tightly spaced and then some areas that were more open. I mean, when you stand back on the other side of the table, to us it looked a bit like a musical score, so that a rhythm would build. And then we thought, okay, we do want another touch, we think. And I had these antique silver balls of my grandmother's. So we thought just a few of those to bring some light up into the tree and again, work on the rhythm back here, which is just a way to bring this sort of spirit and energy, heartbeat back into the space. So rather than sort of decorate individual trees, we stood back, one of us on the other side of the table, and we just placed them so that they work like notes on a musical score. That was our intention, so see what you think about that. But that's what that was all about. And we have loved the fluffiness of these needles as the suns come in the windows and danced off. I just love white pine. They're so soft. So yeah, and gosh, other details. I mean, even as you look into this space, we wanted to have some feeling, again, this is where the animals were. We didn't want it to be anything too fixed, but we like the feeling of having the hay and having that touch of white pine and some of the hemlock we picked, just very, almost like we're just storing some things here, but bringing a little of the spirit back into this. Also just a wonderful, wonderful space. So there's some greens here, and let's see if there's anything, if I bring you around. I do want to show you some of the things on the table and some of the other things that the Emersons contributed. I mean, these marvelous old family coats, family furs. I mean, look at these mittens. Aren't they wonderful? And this coat is so big and heavy. And I have to say, sometimes we were here for hours and hours on these cold days. And there was one day I was just frigid. And I put this on right on top of all of my other things. And gosh, I feel it right now. For some reason, it just starts to warm you up immediately. It's a really special piece and amazing to get, again, this collaboration where the family got quite involved in this, and to have some of their own things made this really special. Coming along, I think we were thinking just some of the design decisions we had were, I guess the first is we didn't want, even though we were doing this in December, we didn't want to tie it specifically. We didn't want to tie it specifically to any particular time, any particular year, and any particular celebration. It was really just this feeling of spirit we were looking for. So we decided right away, we didn't want to use red. We want it to be very natural and then contrasted against this opulence. And And then we found blue was coming into the scene quite a bit. The blue in the carpet, the blue in this canton, which also felt like it had the right, it felt right. And then the family came in and they said, oh yeah, we have a lot of canton in the house. This is something that we use a lot of. So that felt good to us somehow. We keyed into that. And we love seeing these multiple glasses from our families, these schnapps glasses right here. It just looks like they've had a lot of fun, and that's what we were after. And at this long table, so with all these chairs and then even the little children's chairs in the back, just something to suggest different ages in the space, people here enlivening it. So then, of course, I was like, let's see if we can get an actual person in here who will oversee all of this. And I thought right away of my great-great-grandfather, Flavel Harrison. So I brought that over and we put it up right there. It seemed a good spot, tied into the buffet. And then I was talking to the Emersons about him, and we realized that Ralph Waldo Emerson was their great-great-grandfather too. So I looked up the birth date, and he was born at almost exactly the same time as Ralph Waldo Emerson. So that was a lucky thing. I hadn't planned on that, but somehow it seemed fitting, and we really like to have that human presence in the barn over this long period. Now, it did turn out that there was not just, he wasn't the only one at night looking over this scene. We found, not right away, but once we set it up and had it set up a little bit, we found, so we had cracked walnuts along the table. And one day we came in and wow, a fork was moved a little bit. And the walnuts seemed a little different. And it became clear to us that a mouse had come in and quite politely just had a little bit to eat. And then the next day we came back and one of the pears had been taken out of the compote. It was actually sitting right in the middle of this plate and just with a little nibble right around the top. So these were very polite mice in this barn. And because of that, we actually appreciated their presence. It ended up to be a fun surprise every morning to see what they had done. Now, right in the end, I have to say, I think some of their friends came in and they have eaten up all the walnuts and really gotten to some of the pears, and the pears have begun to decay. So I think it is time to bring this wonderful, wonderful experience to a close. So I'm particularly grateful and glad that you can be here today and do this with me and say goodbye to this wonderful time. So I hope you've enjoyed being here as much as I have with you.